All right, everybody, welcome. It is Tuesday, August 11th, 2020, and you are here for the Athens-Clarke County Mayor and Commission's work session and special called session. Just a programming note, I do want to note we're going to go in somewhat unusual order this evening. We're going to hold our special called session, followed by one element of our executive session, which should last for about a half hour. And so for public viewers, we'll be blacked out for that half hour. And then our work session will begin, and we'll run through our work session at that point. So to go ahead and begin, I'll ask Clerk Spratland to call the roll.
Davenport.
Here.
Parker. Mute.
Here.
Blank.
Here.
Wright.
Present.
Denson.
Here.
Edwards.
Here.
Harrod.
Present.
Thornton.
Ovita, I think you're on mute.
No. Oh, there I go. Here.
Okay. We have a quorum.
All right. We have one slight amendment to the resolution to make. Just need a motion to amend the agenda to include a resolution and budgetary allocation.
So move.
I'll second.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Hearing none, the agenda is set. All right. So our single item of new business to consider under suspension of rules is here. I just need a motion for suspension of rules.
So moved.
All right. I've got a motion from Commissioner Hamby, second from Commissioner Dunston. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. The rules are suspended. All right, so we have a resolution to authorize the execution of the Coronavirus Relief Fund terms and conditions, and with this commission-defined option to allocate funds as well. I want to begin just by saying that I appreciate very much Commission spending a lot of energy working on this, and appreciate all the staff research and work and engagement with federal and state authorities, say for members of the public. You may have heard members of Congress speaking about how local governments have not spent what's allocated through the CARES Act. And in large part, that's because both federal authorities and state enabling authorities have not made that easy to spend those funds. Guidance has come out very late in the process, and everybody has been working overtime just to get the guidance that they possibly can. I want to begin just asking Attorney Drake to talk a little bit about the nature of the resolution and how that was delivered to local governments and what it does.
Josh?
You're muted, Judd. Go right ahead now. Got you unmuted.
This resolution was sent out to local governments as a model resolution to authorize the execution of the Coronavirus Relief Fund Terms and Conditions Agreement, to authorize the acceptance of the grant payments from the state of Georgia, it also directs and authorizes the person identified as the official representative of the local government to act in connection with the grant application. And so that is what the agreement does. That's what the resolution is for. And so we'll be basically adopting the Coronavirus Relief Fund Terms and Conditions Agreement with the state of Georgia. And that agreement, it was sent out to all local governments who were receiving pass-through funds, and is required. The execution of that agreement and the agreement, the terms and conditions of that agreement are required as a condition of receiving any of the pass-through CARES Act relief funds from the state of Georgia.
Thank you, Judd. And I know that there's an option that directs staff to transfer approximately $5.3 million of funds from the fund balance to the organizations that are listed in the attachment. And I'll ask Commissioner Hamby or Commissioner Thornton as sponsor of the CDO to describe those in just a minute or two. We, of course, are getting this continual fire hose of guidance from state entities, including from the Department of Community Affairs. Manager Williams, I believe you were able to be on a call with Department of Community Affairs, DCA, this afternoon. Is there anything that you would want to relate about their guidance?
Well, the specific question that we posed to them was, from a direct relief, there seemed to be some conflicting language between the Treasury guidance from the federal Treasury, which indicated that there could be relief provided to other organizations beyond the government, and then some from the training last Friday, and Attorney Drake could speak to the wording there. What we got from our DCA representative, which is sort of the first level of approval, was that they did recognize a Treasury guidance on that, but they are discouraging local governments from trying to make that happen before the September 1st deadline, because the state is accountable to the federal government to provide all the supporting documentation, and they did not feel like trying for local governments to stand up a grant program and expend the funds and get the documentation and get it back to the state. They don't have the folks to really help manage that. And so the other thing that's important, because we've had this conversation, is that, there was an inference that there's a phase 2. They can't guarantee it, is exactly the words the lady said to me today. But I would say, I think the way that the CDO is structured is a way to accomplish what you wanted to accomplish in last week's action. And if phase 2 does come to fruition, then we can work to have a program stood up that will accomplish those same goals that you'd like to see, given a little more time. But we will real time relay what we're learning from the state to all of you, so you understand what's going on.
Thanks, Blaine. I appreciate that. And I would say to commissioners in this meeting and broader members of the public, I would encourage you to contact the governor's office to ensure that the state government of Georgia delivers as much possible CARES Act fund to localities as possible. I know that everybody in this meeting is getting calls every day from individuals who are concerned about being able to make utility payments, from people who are out of work wanting to just make sure they can maintain their residence, from business people who've seen their business crater, after years of hard work. And these funds, I think, is very well outlined by commissioners last week, and then in today's action that we'll hear just a little bit more about, have really spoken to those human on the ground needs. And I want to make sure that the state is absolutely responsive to those needs. And so it's frustrating to hear any level of discord from the state about the possibility of the full CARES Act allocation for smaller local governments in any question at all. As we've talked about before as a body, larger local governments, so your Cobb counties, your city of Atlanta's, your Gwinnett counties, received direct funds a couple of months ago from the federal government, and it's taken this long for the state really to roll out guidance and delivery. So anyhow, all that said, commissioners, members of the public, please contact the governor's Office of Planning and Budget and encourage that second delivery. I think a very smart element of this CDO that I'll ask Mike to talk about in just a second, is that we have a plan for that second phase, and so to have a work session so we can craft that plan. So, Mike, if you could talk a little bit about the line items and about the intent for a work session for a second phase of CARES Act dollars.
Sure, Mayor. Thank you. I appreciate you letting me speak here. So we did. Can you hear me? All right. Yes. Okay. Good. So we did work on a CDO, and not much has changed from the last week when we spoke about these dollars and where they could go to help our community needs. But what we were trying to do in the CDO was to address some of the issues that Manager Williams and Attorney Drake have been brought up about this funding and some of the guidelines associated with it. So what we've done here is, we know for certain that we're getting approximately $6.2 million. So what we've done is work from that number. And what this commission defined option does is it adopts the resolution that Attorney Drake wants us to adopt tonight. And it also, as a budgetary thing, directs staff to seek reimbursement for phase one amount of that total of the $6,643,602 million, if I'm saying that. It's a large number, more money than I got for eligible expenses. And we're asking them to do that, of course, to meet the deadline before September 1st. And according to the guidelines, you can do that with what we've used for COVID-related expenses within this government, which I'm certain total that amount when you take into payroll for public safety, the PPE stuff that we've done, the food delivery stuff that we've done. So we're asking staff to seek the reimbursement for that amount before September 1st. The second component of this is also before September 1st because we want to be on the timeline that we're on because we recognize that, these dollars are meant to help the community and the citizens that we represent and the residents that we represent. So we want to make sure that it does that this money does that. So we'd like to authorize staff to immediately transfer approximately $5.3 million, I'll say, from fund balance for the purposes and organizations in Attachment 1 to be used by December 30th. And what that does is it allows us to do that for the organizations who are our partners in helping us through this community crisis. And they're doing that in such a way by helping with rent assistance. They're doing that in such a way by helping with food, by helping with internet connections, by helping with financial assistance. And, as we've seen, the federal guidelines do allow for direct relief like that. So I know there was a training on Sunday. I did listen to it, and I've seen the presentations. They're not real clear on the state, but the federal government certainly is clear on it. And certainly other communities in Georgia are already doing this. Columbus, Georgia's actually got a little portal up for taking suggestions about how to do who needs the grant dollars. Savannah's doing this, and Rome, Georgia's. Their website says that they're using CARE dollars, but evidently they're using the COVID CARE dollars, which we haven't even begun to utilize yet. Which I'm interested in seeing how we can get those started as well, because I think there's about $850,000 associated.
That's just the first delivery of those special CDBG funds.
Right.
So there'll be more of that too.
Exactly, and that's a good thing. So at any rate, what we're doing here, I think, and I believe, follows the guidelines that the federal government has laid out for us to be able to help the residents of our community in this time of crisis, and the residents and the businesses and such as that. So you'll see in the details of the commission defined option where we're recommending these go that we talked about last week and that we all approved. So anyway, authorize staff to immediately transfer $5.3 million from the fund balance for those purposes and for the organizations. And upon receiving the state reimbursement that we need to turn in by September 1st, upon receiving that state reimbursement, transfer that $5.3 million back to the fund balance, because we, in this time of crisis, we do realize how important the fund balance is. That's why we have a fund balance, to help us through a crisis. And if we can borrow against it, knowing that we're going to get some reimbursements from some federal dollars, then that's why that money's there. So, and then also before September 30th, we're asking that staff organize a work session to determine how to utilize the assumed additional $15 million from CARES to meet community needs, or whatever amount that may be. Because what I've learned from this process, Mayor, and others, is that we kind of need to anticipate what's coming down the line and be able to discuss it before we get to a tight timeline, as we've heard a lot here mentioned lately. So having that work session before September 30th to allow us and to allow other organizations to know what we can do with these federal dollars, I think will go a long way in helping us and our community partners provide the services that we need for residents of our community. And I will say this about, I lost my train of thought. I do that all the time these days, but at any rate, I think y'all see where I'm going with that. We do ask that the partners that we're working with to use the money by December 30th, so that residents can realize some immediate impact. Because residents right now, of course, with a rental assistance and such as that assistance is needed. It needed like yesterday. And I would expect under that $5.3 million, as you see on page 2, we list who can help us with the financial assistance, who can help us with the rental assistance, and these are organizations that have been helping us for years in the community do some good things and have the capacity to help us continue to help through this crisis. So we have it broken up into that, and also the economic development. Now, within the economic development, I'd like to suggest that we do give it to the economic development department, but we do need, and perhaps we can do this through a notice of administrative action or something of that sort that allows our economic development department, and Ilka McConnell's doing a great job to come up with some guidelines about how we can utilize those grants for businesses and what businesses would apply for it. Because I know some communities are doing it where if you've received PPE, you wouldn't be eligible for a local community grant, or if you have a certain number of employees, you may be eligible for a grant. But if you have a large number of employees, I don't know. So, but anyway, I don't know that we need to get into the weeds on that. I trust Ms. McConnell and to come up with some of the guidelines that can help this community. So we have the economic development we also, part of the federal guidelines certainly are that you can focus these monies on health allocations. And we do that with Athens Nurses Clinic, who for years have been helping this community stay healthy. And there's also some others here with Athens Behavioral and the Innovation Health Care Institute, as well as the Neighborhood Health Center. Commissioner Lee brought this up last week. Those dollars are in here to help provide the testing equipment that's needed so that we can have a really good figure about what's going on in our community and be able to address that. We do put some money in here for some public information. Jeff Montgomery's been working hard trying to get the word out about what this government's doing about COVID, and we're responding to it, and all the additional things that we're responding to that are associated with that. So we recognize that his office needs some resources, and we're hopeful that this can help provide some additional resources for him to utilize to get the word out in the community. And the two final things: the transit to be able to continue transit fare, reduce fare reduction extension through the end of the year. We've been allowing for fare-free transit, so hopefully this will allow for that to continue through the end of the year, as we recognize people with challenges of mobility need some assistance in helping to get to the grocery store, to get the prescriptions, and so forth like that. And the final thing that I'm really glad we're doing is working with the school system on IT internet access. We're trying to, this package here, the CDO that several commissioners worked on is and all of us worked on really over this time, is recognizing that all of this involves partnerships. And this is one of the partnerships that we're looking at with the school board, and making sure that as they're trying to meet the challenge of providing learning to kids, providing a safe environment for teachers and kids, what can we do as a community, as a local government, to help with that Wi-Fi access for distance learning? And the items listed here that total about $543,000 allow our IT department to strategically place, and I hope I'm explaining this right, strategically place some Wi-Fi sort of radar antenna type things that will allow us to, or allow our residents to access some Wi-Fi so that they can participate in the distance learning and can participate in the distance teaching and can participate in whatever work environment that's requiring them to work from home. So, we're trying to, we can't make everybody happy, but hopefully this CDO is addressing some things that we've all heard about and that we all need to address. So I'm gonna stop. But before I stop, I'm gonna go ahead and make a motion that we adopt this CDO, which includes item 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 on that first page there. Adopt the CARES resolution, seek reimbursement for the $6.6 million, authorize staff to transfer the $5.3 million. Upon receiving state reimbursement, pay us back the $5.3 million and determine how to utilize the $15 million through a work session at some point before September 30th. And,
I second it.
and let me make real clear to the organizations that we have listed here, we need this money used by December 30th, but we don't want it wasted. We want it used on, I don't want you to spend it just to be spending. If you can't spend it, let us know and we'll make adjustments. But we want it to go to helping people. And that's the key in this, because if you recognize in the document, we stipulate how much could go towards staff, for example. Most of the money we want, all of the money, basically 98% of it to each organization is going to go towards support for people in the community. So that's my motion. I think I heard Ovita second it, but you may want to second it again, Ovita, just in case.
I second it.
So I got a motion from Commissioner Hamby, a second from Commissioner Thornton. Questions from commissioners? Melissa?
Yeah, I have a couple questions about the economic development aspect of this. We've got $1.6 million for our economic development department for small business grants, and $500,000 for the Northeast Georgia Business Alliance. I know we also have our development authority, our joint development authority with Winterville underway. When will the call go out for local businesses to apply for these grants? When will the details on that process go out?
So good question, Melissa. So this body has previously allocated $1 million for loan funds to flow through the Joint Development Authority that we've stood up with the city of Winterville. And that group has been doing fabulous work and really meeting at least once a week and sometimes twice a week to finalize detail. By necessity, given the funds, this is going to have to involve some partnership with a financial institution. But we've got some partners at the table, and it would be very easy for the grant program to piggyback on the already built infrastructure that the loan program is just about set up for. I anticipate about another week or 10 days of very minute final details for the loan program. Would anticipate no later than the end of the month when the application portal would open for the loan program, and the grant program could happen, in my estimation, simultaneously.
Okay, so month's end, there'll be a call put out for these funds that are available for small businesses.
That's right.
Okay. I also have a question about the mobile health clinic. These funds are for the existing mobile health clinic, right? Is that correct, or are we talking about a second van? Because I know there has been some talk of getting a second vehicle to have a second center.
And that's correct. It's expanding the mobile health clinic that is pretty much operated by UGA. So yes, it is going to be an expansion. It will be another van. I don't know the details, But yes, but Spencer is working with Dr. Lester.
Yes, I spoke with Representative Fry today, and we talked a little bit about the fact that there is funding in the FY21 budget through the Safe Communities and Public Safety package for another mobile health van. So I'm wondering if we couldn't turn to those funds and allow these clinics to access additional funds, because I know staffing is going to be an issue with these additional testing capabilities. So would there be some flexibility in that if we were to access the funding that's already put aside in the FY21 budget for another van?
I think the flexibility is in there for all of the proposals.
Okay.
All of these groups have been talking amongst themselves. Other issues have been coming up that they have addressed and will present. We just needed to get this moving so they could start working. But I don't think nobody wrote anything concrete. I think they're waiting to work with HCD as we move forward. But it's very flexible right now.
Okay, good. Because I was on the call with those independent agency healthcare providers today and with Representative Fry, and some of this stuff came up, and I just want to make sure that we're using all our resources to the optimum capability. And if we do have, our own budgeted money set aside for a van, then we can offer these additional funds to these healthcare centers for staffing and actual care. So I just wanted to put that out there ahead of time. And I think that's it. I'm just grateful to see this money moving out the door and into folks' pockets so they can take care of some really dire needs.
One of the things I would say is I did some research. Mike did a lot of the work, but I did do some research. And one of the problems we had in the past was how we could use money to work at faith-based organizations. This money, according to the Georgia Municipal Association report, these monies can be used for the faith-based organizations that we have not been able to work with before.
Thanks, Commissioner. Other commission questions or input? Let's see, Patrick and then Tim. Oh, you're muted. I got you. Go ahead.
Don't mute buttons. Okay.
Gotcha.
Looks like great work. I just got a question. Who decided the allocation of funds and who picked the agencies? And when it comes to accountability by December 31st, who is going to be, would it be HCD who will be monitoring how the funds are going to be spent?
Kelly, maybe I can take a crack at this one.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry, Mayor. So Commissioner Davenport, to answer your first question, the agencies, we initially had that recommendation from Manager Williams that listed several of the same agencies in here. And what we were looking for are agencies that have demonstrated in the past and we know are partners in helping us meet the community needs that we're trying to meet at this time, like rental assistance and helping people from facing the eviction crisis that's on us now and is going to probably get even worse from that standpoint. We also looked at our health partners that we worked with that we know can do some work from that standpoint in doing that. So that gives you some idea about that. We needed the short time frame makes it to where we have to move quickly on this and looking for those organizations who have the capacity and the experience and the constituencies to help us address all sorts of financial assistance that may be needed. I will say this: the thing on before September 30th, the work session, will help us maybe look at things a little bit differently and open the door a little bit to some other ideas and to some other organizations and to some other faith-based organizations that Commissioner Thornton's pointed out, and that can help us also address some of these ongoing problems that we're facing as a community. So I'm hopeful that September 30th we'll find new partners to bring into the fold to help us with that. So does that?
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, no, that's good. Blaine, could you speak briefly? Go ahead, Avita.
I just want to add one thing. If you look at most of those organizations that are part of this package, they were groups that, for one reason or another, were not funded with the Resilience Package a few months ago. So even though they were doing good work, because of the criteria and the limitations, they were not funded. These dollars don't have all of those attachments to it. So we were able to go down that list and reach out to most of those folk as the beginning of the selection process. But I shouldn't say selection. It was just how that was one of the mechanisms we used.
Thanks, Avita. Blaine, could you speak a little bit to how tracking and compliance checking would work?
Yes. So there'll need to be some form of agreement with the respective agencies. So, there's in order to convey the funds, and we can work with the attorney's office on that. We would probably model compliance with, and in that agreement would be expectations, probably monthly reporting. I know that all of you are interested in what are the outcomes of this investment of funds. And so we'll have to come up with some indicators that we would like the agencies to track broadly. As you know, HCD, I think one of the many good approaches in this action is that once the funds come back to the unified government from the state, they don't have the federal strings necessarily all attached like CDBG or others do. So the compliance won't be as onerous. And with HUD, our staff has to do that compliance day in, day out with our HUD recipients. But we will be checking in with these other folks and making sure that they've got the support that they need and they are delivering. And there'll be some, if they don't, then there'll be some things in the agreement that speak to that, and everybody will understand on the front end. So the compliance checks will have to continue with HUD, and we will do them as needed with this next round of funding that you're about to appropriate.
Thanks, Blaine. Tim, you had a question?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. And this is great, and appreciate Commissioners Hamby and Thornton working on all this. My one question and potential concern is on the IT internet access category, just very specific throughout that one in a way that the other categories aren't. And I guess I have a little bit of concern if we were to be able to find in the next few months a better way to move forward in that we're a little bit locked in there. Honestly, one of my things that I'm a little more interested in than, I want us to do this thing where we're rolling out Wi-Fi access, but I would much rather us help families just be able to pay for internet access within their home more so than have internet access just at a park. And I would love to see us somehow work with AT&T or Charter, which they are offering $10 a month for all families who get free or reduced lunches at their schools, which covers every single family in Clarke County School District, that we just subsidize their internet in their home. So I'm a little concerned about those extreme specifics on the actual items that we'd be purchasing. It would be more comfortable if we could remove that and have it, and if that's what we need, then that's what we get, but to remove those specifics to give us the flexibility like we have in the other categories.
Tim, I believe our commission meeting and school board meeting is August the 24th. And maybe that's where we figure out what exactly is needed. And because I have not talked to anybody from the school district. I know that I've gotten some emails, but I haven't talked to anybody. But maybe on the 24th, Blaine, there would be some room for flexibility after that meeting. Would you say?
Mayor, would you want me to adjust?
Yeah, go right ahead, Blaine. And I know Mike had a comment as well.
Well, Commissioner Hamby mentioned this earlier. So the answer is no. there won't be the flexibility because of the timeline in this tranche of funds. We have to expend it, which, and I know this caused some confusion, but why we came to you early last week trying to get some guidance, because we have to buy it. We have to turn the receipts into the state. So I think the delivery model we've talked about, Commissioner Denson, is using our 15 or so sites around the community to bolster the Wi-Fi and give students access to that when they come there. That's what was discussed with Mayor Gertz and the subcommittee from the school district a couple of weeks ago.
And I hear that, I guess, and still, like I said, if we remove those, I know we do have to get these receipts, like you said. We do have a little bit of time. And again, I guess what I'm saying is that removing those specific items does give us this flexibility. We can buy those items, but it does give us the flexibility if here in the next week or two, we came up with a hybrid model or a different model. Because again, I want to, like, a child who has internet in their home and is able to use internet in their home to do their schoolwork is going to be much more successful than a child who has to go to a park and has a very limited amount of time they get to get on the internet to do their schoolwork. So all I'm asking for is that remove the specific lines, leave us a little bit of time and room to find a possible hybrid model or maybe some other solutions. And if this is what we need to buy, we can, right? But just to remove those specifics, giving us that flexibility.
The other thing I'd note, Tim, is just that we will have this second wave, and I'll go ahead and schedule the work session sooner rather than later, so that in phase 2, with the additional funds that the state allocates, that we can draw those down as quickly as possible for those additional needs. We know we've got these community points, your bishop parks, your lay parks that are under-resourced. But I agree that eventually where we want to get as quickly as possible is that broader and individual community access. And I think we can get there. Mike, you wanted to make a comment.
Yeah, and maybe this can help alleviate some of Commissioner Denson's concerns. And I remember you bringing this up last week, Commissioner Denson. And if you'll notice on the IT numbers came directly from staff about what they would need for the Wi-Fi access for distance learning. As a matter of fact, it was copy and pasted from what they were asking for to be able to do this. But I will say this. What we've done to address the concerns, like we talked about last week, Commissioner Denson, was up in phase 1 of the community needs. If you look at some of those of the organizations that we have there, we do list financial assistance, food, housing, and communication access allocations. So I agree with you that those are important to be able to do that, and certainly the federal guidelines allow for if you're working from home or distance learning, that's one of the allowed uses of these dollars, and from that standpoint, so there is the flexibility within those organizations to be able to turn in a proposal to be able to help us with that assistance. So I hope that helps, and I hope in phase 2 we can do even more help with it. Hope that helps answer your question too. That's it. I'm done.
Thank you, Tim.
I appreciate that. I remember I was talking about that too, but I guess I hate to see us have to eat into that money, which a lot of that money is going to be needing to go to very expensive things such as rent assistance. And honestly, this just comes down to, I guess I would have appreciated a little bit more of a expansive discussion around the Wi-Fi access with the entire body, I guess, because like Commissioner Thornton said, like I had to go out of my way to try to find out what the exact goal was too. I wasn't having a lot of communication. And while I definitely appreciate us putting Wi-Fi at parks, again, when it's raining, when it's, you're a high schooler and you're trying to do your homework at 9:30 at night, I think a much better way of using $543,000 to get internet access to people would be just helping to pay $10 a month for those families who need it. I mean, we've got 14,000 students at CCSD. That'd be $140,000 a month to pay for every single student to have that internet package. I hear what y'all are saying, but I'm a little concerned again about the inequities and internet access that we're going to have moving forward here as soon as school starts up.
Allison?
Thanks. Can you guys hear me okay? It's a new headphone. We
Yeah, you're good.
Remember last week I had to ditch that one. So I really appreciate the work that's been done with this and everybody's enthusiasm for this. And Tim, I really appreciate your passion for the school district students. But the school district is in a perfect position to be able to help those that reduced fund might be an issue for. And I think that there's a lot of people in our community that don't have that CCSD connection that we need to be open to be able to help too. So if we're able to be in more public places, there's likely some UGA students who don't have access to internet at their house, and that sort of thing. So I think that for us to be doing stuff for the whole community, knowing that the school district also has that focus for the school district connectivity, no pun intended, but their ability to outreach is there as well. But I think that this is good moving forward, and I appreciate us being able to do things sooner rather than later in this respect for our community. And also, not to forget that SPLOST, if we can prioritize SPLOST 2020 funds and us go ahead and start working on our broadband, because part of the reason that we need to have internet access at community areas is because some people, even with funding and assistance, the internet is not even available where they live. So if we can prioritize that with our SPLOST and get going on that, we can get broadband maybe in places so it is available in more homes.
Thanks, Allison. Anyone else? All right, everybody ready to vote? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries. Do need a motion to enter executive session.
So moved.
Mayor,
Yes, Blaine, go ahead.
if I might, I think there's a budget ordinance associated with that action.
I thank you for that. I appreciate
Yes,
it.
yes, sir.
Attorney Drake, do you want to read a budget ordinance? And I'll get another vote on the budget component.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, let me pull that up. An ordinance to amend the fiscal year 2021 annual operating and capital budget for Athens-Clarke County, Georgia. So funding for Athens-Clarke COVID-19 relief program and other purposes.
All right. I'll take another vote just to confirm the budget component.
Aye.
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 All right. Any opposed? All right. Motion carries. All right. Once again, motion to enter executive session.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
I've got I'm going to take a motion from Commissioner Wright. I'll take the second from Commissioner Davenport. You win the prize. All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. We're going to go ahead and take about a half-hour executive session for staff people who are on. I think Manager Williams will go ahead and send you a message when we're ready to re-enter the public works session. So take just a moment so public information can put up the notice to the public who are watching this on broadcast or online. All right, welcome back, everyone. I appreciate you hanging on through our executive session delay. We are going to move on to our work session, and the first order of business tonight is an update on our staff level COVID response. So I'm going to go ahead and turn that over to Manager Williams.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to share my screen here, and we'll get started. I know the agenda said resiliency package update, but really, after the last few weeks and talking with citizens, trying to just summarize all the work that's been done by the staff and the mayor and commission in support of the community through this event. I thought was important for us to go through, so I'll be quick on this. So the purpose of the presentations, review the response. Really, there's been three major areas that we have been assisting in the response: the public health, community support, and just our operations in general. One thing that I think is helpful to remind everybody is that this was talked about back during the resiliency package when it was when you passed it. That I think you recognize, obviously, through your actions, the gravity of the situation in this pandemic. And we understand that it's not going to be a quick fix, that we're going to be there for a while. It's going to be around for a while. And so really, this is a busy chart. But I want to just point to the top here for the public is that the way that we had envisioned this back in May, having no idea, was that that we would have this period of time, March through May, and then in reaction to both the things that you did here to keep citizens safe and the lockdown across the country for the most part, that we would have a decline in cases, which was the case. But that has ramped up a little bit quicker than we thought. We thought we really would have until November and the advent of flu season before we would see the resurgence. But as you know, and I think this has been characterized such in the media, this really isn't maybe the resurgence yet. It's just a sort of a follow-on of the initial outbreak. It's just come back with a vengeance. But so we do see some issues for both our operations and the community in general in tandem with flu season. And we're hopeful that once flu season wanes next year, we will see a decrease in cases, and then hopefully a vaccine will be developed in early next year. And then, of course, it's going to take time to distribute that vaccine. So just looking out over the next year and a half, next year from now, year and a half from the pandemic outbreak, of having to moderate our operations, but continue to deliver services, and then also help the community. And I'll speak more about that in a minute. This is the community chart, and with the resiliency package funding, and that is the $5.2 million that you approved, which is a combination of some of the leftover prosperity package funds and also fund balance. You can see here how we envisioned using that $5.2 million over the time period that I just described, whether it's through supporting vulnerable populations, through indigent services, the Athens Community Corps program, which we'll talk about, partnering with public health, the food distribution. So there's a number of things, the resiliency package, the low interest business or no interest business loans, economic relief for artists. These are a number of things you've already approved. And it was a lot of money, but it was spread out over the course of the year with, you can see most of it here being in and during the wintertime and flu season when we think people are really going to be hurting, not that they're not hurting now. So just to remind you, last week and talking with some of you and citizens, just thinking about everything that's happened in such a short amount of time, it seems like a year or more. But, it was just 5 months ago that we had our first case. And you very quickly moved to approve a shelter in place and allocate, the beginnings of the resiliency package, and asked me to come back with some recommendations, which I did. We got past the lockdown, and you awarded $150,000 for indigent support services, right out of the gate. You created a joint development authority. You went ahead and issued an RFP. The initial $150,000 for indigent support services was envisioned to last for 90 days, which it did. And then staff immediately jumped on the next 90 days after that, getting the RFP issued and out there. You did allocate $85,000 in partnership with the Athens Cultural Affairs Commission to assist with the artist. Appointments were made to the Joint Development Authority shortly thereafter. You adopted the FY21 budget, which I will speak about the number of ways in which you supported the community through the actions you took there. Not long after we got the governor's first letter on the CARES Act funding, which you have acted on this evening, it was important to get through the budget before you adopted the resiliency package to understand how much fund balance you wanted to put towards that. And so 2 weeks after the adoption of the budget, you had adopted the resiliency package, which was a little over a month ago. At the same time, another $300,000 for indigent support services, and I'll tell you about the recipients there. I sent out, as you know, some funding information that what we knew at the time on July 24th, and you provided some initial direction last week. We had some more training, and tonight you have approved another allocation for the community. So this is just the high-level things that some of the things that you've been involved in, but not all, and certainly not all that staff's been involved in. So I'd like to talk more about that. So in the COVID-19, what we find ourselves in is a public health pandemic. And public health is not something that is among the 40 or so departments that we serve, but we do partner with our local public health. And there are numerous health partners here that we have supported, and I'm going to go through those in a minute. Community supports as well with the initial $150,000, and then the distribution of masks. You felt like it was very important that we get, for anybody that needed a mask, that we try to get these out into the community. And then, of course, with our own internal operations and 1,700 employees across, as I said, 40 service lines, we've had to be very careful because we can't afford not to provide the vital services that our citizens have come to expect and deserve. And so it's important that we keep that going. So with public health, there's several areas that our folks have supported and you have supported through funding: mobile clinic, hospitals, our public health, and long-term care. Very quickly, one of the things that we did was our staff provided a facility and staffed a PPE distribution hub from March until July, and then they've subsequently found a new place. But what I'm trying to do tonight is just catch you up on, since the advent of the pandemic, things that we have done to support the community. And as you can see, it takes various shapes, but a lot of this PPE came through us out to our partners in the community. And you can see here nursing homes, dialysis, hospitals, long-term care, all were recipients of some of this that we received from the state. Also, since March until May, our personnel helped support the Northeast Health District specimen collection site, and we continue to support them. And the work here in the community has resulted in over 6,500 specimens collected. With our hospitals, we continue to support them. We help them with planning for surge and requesting resources through us from the GEMA State Operations Center. And we do provide courier services to take used PPE for sterilization and return them. And over 30 batches of PPE have been done in that form. Long-term care and skilled nursing facilities. We process, our staff request and coordinate infection control provided by the National Guard, and since April, we've had over 40 infection control services provided to facilities within Clarke County through that, and testing to all patients and staff by the National Guard at 10 facilities at least once since April. And then the partnership with the mobile Athens Free Clinic, and this was something that many of you were intensely interested in early on. that we help provide some assistance, and we have provided what we've been asked to do, and that has been mainly to maintain the hotline for their patient onboarding. But they've also asked for staff to help support the hotline, which we're preparing for. And then, of course, and I'll talk a little bit more about all of the great work our Public Information Office has done, but we have provided them with not only PPE, but also yard signs and flyers as well. And they, as of August 4th, have provided almost 1,800 tests in the community. And for those of the public that are watching, the mobile free clinic has really been focused on vulnerable populations in areas of our community that may not have the access to testing that most of us have. Community messaging has been a huge way in the way our staff has supported the community through this, and led by our communications branch. There's been the whole 4-point concept, which I have seen from county line to county line signs related to keeping healthy and distanced and connected. There's been 1,100 of those yard signs distributed, 30,000 flyers, 100 vehicle magnets, and we've got a newsletter that has over 1,200 subscriptions now. And this is really just the messaging. We'll talk about our virtual platforms in just a minute. Another way that the government has supported the community is responding to calls and through our enforcement, and this has gotten a lot of conversation of late. And so we asked our staff to compile some data, and they've had almost 200 calls for services related to COVID-19 since March. And in all but one instance, the police department was able to gain voluntary compliance, and that is consistent with the governor's order that when going out, you seek voluntary compliance first, and then there's a warning, and so on and so forth. And you can see here, and of course, I'll provide this. We'll put it up on the website. This is how this went, and I think our officers have done a very good job in not being too heavy-handed, but trying to educate and make folks aware, and that's consistent with the direction you provided back during the first shelter-in-place order. There's also been almost 200 checks of bars for compliance in just this last month, both on the wearing of masks and distancing, as well as occupancy requirements. And, when going inside, 91% of the bars were in compliance with PPE and distancing requirements, and 96% were in compliance with occupancy requirements upon check. Now, I think you'd all agree where we've had our most issues are outside the bars, and we have continued to try to, our officers have tried to emphasize the need for safety in those instances. Now, there have been warnings issued, and again, that is sort of that progressive escalation of penalty that the governor had put in place, and there's been 15 warnings on the PPE distancing requirements and 9 on occupancy requirements. With community supports, the first phase, if you will, the resiliency package has to do with indigent services, and there was that first $150,000 right out of the gate that y'all approved. And I'll talk about some of the outcomes there. And then there was the second amount of funding you approved of $300,000, and we'll talk about those very briefly as well. The first, though, I want to talk about our business supports. And we have our new Economic Development Director, Ilka McConnell, and along with her staff, and Ryan, our interim director before that, have really been hit the ground running with COVID. And I think this is really thematic with both the way that we have worked with our partners in the community, but collaboration. This is such a huge and sticky issue, the pandemic, that we have to partner together. And the Ready, Set, Go Safely campaign was something that our staff participated in. The creation of a business support webpage and partnering with the Chamber. I know the Chamber and the Small Business Development Center and our Economic Development Department at the very beginning came together, created a shared message, and then really promoted that message on the various networks to get the information out there about the help that was available. and also creating a new Athens Creative Registry. And there are approximately 30 artists that have entered their information in the week that it's been live. Also, you did create the Joint Development Authority with the intent initially of being the body or the vehicle by which to distribute loans, and that, of course, was recommended by our council. And I will tell you that, and the mayor has said as much, that the group has worked very hard. They are very committed, and they are standing up a loan program in short order. I know that it may not be happening as quickly as we would like, but they are. It's not because they haven't been working hard, and they are, as you can imagine. And I think, and there was some mention tonight that perhaps they might be a good, since they're so far along with their structure, to also help assist with the grants program. We can talk more about that. In either case, and I think it's true in Columbus, there's a need for a third-party outside group to really come in and help, score the application, cut the checks, and I'm talking about economic development. This is not so much the case with the nonprofits, which we'll talk about in a minute. So they're actively soliciting that, and a little under 10 days, they'll be making a decision on that as well. And the initial seed funding there comes from your approval of $1 million in the Resiliency Package. You also created the Athens Community Corps, and an update on that. The Workforce Development Coordinator interviews are currently being conducted, are starting this week. And then we've ordered the equipment that's required. The job descriptions for the participants are being reviewed by HR. And you will vote next week at the special called session on an ordinance to amend regarding temporary full-time employees. And the reason why we're having to do this is because these are temporary employees. We don't want to do this contract, and we want to provide benefits to the employees. That's consistent with what you had indicated in the beginning. So these will be 11-month full-time benefited employees with the new category that you'll approve. With indigent services, in the initial April 14th award, there were several recipients. One was the Athens Area Homeless Shelter in the amount of $61,500. And both for Athens, for the homeless shelter and for Advantage, this took the form of direct hotel payment assistance for homeless families. And it's, it's important for their safety and public health in general that folks are given a safe space in which to be with their families. And this was done through the hotels here locally. And so 12 families have been served, including 14 adults, 27 children, through that particular award. And with Advantage, this also hotel payment assistance and the staffing of 3 part-time weekend positions for the Homeless Day Service Center. And you can see the number of individuals here that were served by that. Very important service. Family Promise of Athens was awarded $16,000, and they've helped 22 families since in the time period of the $16,000 that you gave them. So I also mentioned that you've already approved $300,000 for round 2, and they are the folks, the agencies I just mentioned, are just wrapping up the first round of expenses, and some of those are continuing on, and some of them you've added to, including Action, the Athens Area Diaper Bank, Casa de Amistad, EADC, and People Living in Recovery. So $300,000 are looking to be used in the community to help some vulnerable and indigent populations between now and the end of October. Mass distribution was something else that you'd asked for, and I want to credit our transit leadership and staff for helping to capture $10 million of the transit funds that you approved for these uses. And we purchased masks, and in collaboration with our community partners, 44,000 masks have been distributed in the last month and a half. And I believe we have another $20,000 on 20,000 masks on order. The Neighborhood Leaders is another program that was created by you the previous fiscal year and continued this year, and they are assisting through the pandemic in a number of ways, and these are the touches that they've had in the period between March and June. Reaching out, introducing people to who they are and what they're doing, sharing information that we would like to further to the community, connecting people to resources, setting appointments, and helping with school-related issues as well. And so there's a number of, I think, meaningful interactions that the neighborhood leaders are having in the community. With our operations, we've done a number of things, including a cloth mask initiative, 2 for every employee that was done by our own employees. Transitioning, like many organizations across the country and world, to teleworking and embracing technology, keeping it safe initiative, and our digital services. With the digital services, that has been, I think, an innovation that we really need to hold up, and we've all been the beneficiaries of that. And I believe that it's helped our processes and certainly our committee meetings and the doings of this body to be more transparent and more accessible. And so hats off to our public information staff. Over 120 public meetings have been live streamed. There's been 11 community conversation videos with Mayor Gertz. We've got an info line call center with English and Spanish options to answer questions. And I think this is an amazing statistic, but the number of minutes of video watched has increased 10 times the amount in quarters 3 and 4 of FY19 and 20. And that is 1.5 million minutes watched the latter half of this year compared to 122,000 last year. So I think that says that the content of the work that you do is important to people, and they are looking to you and us during this time period for information to see what's happening here locally. With our internal approach, we've done a number of things and have had to innovate here as well. And we, as you know, and I described briefly earlier, we've got several levels of how our services are provided. We had level 1, which is effectively the lockdown when we didn't know, and I closed workstations. Level 2, which is, where we were for a couple of months, is where we were being very thoughtful about rotating teams of employees into the workspace, not allowing the public into our workspaces for the most part. The courthouse, of course, is managed by a Chief Superior Court judge, a little bit different approach with what they do. And now we're in level 3, where the public, it can come in to access our services, but we've really put an emphasis on trying to provide other alternatives for service delivery for our public to access, and we are using technology to do that. We've been very careful to track and report employee exposures, and the Cloth Math initiative, I think you've seen the video on that, was highly successful, and I think it was totally done by our own employees and donations from the community so that we would not take away from any of the momentum that was being channeled towards our healthcare providers. And of course, the Transit Cares Act funding, just an update there. Of course, the $10.4 million that was awarded. And since January 20th, we've got $2.7 million of that total in eligible operating expense. And that has included, cleaning sanitation supplies for our facilities, installing the plexiglass barriers in the buses to protect our bus operators and the public. The cloth mask and the mask out to our riders and the public in general, and then the equipment to clean the transit facilities. And so, I think another notable mention here is that this CARES Act funding has been able to offset some of the otherwise general fund contribution and allowed you to channel that towards other community purposes, and I think that should be recognized. So. This is something that I've been thinking about, and I don't think the average citizen really understands what the mayor and commission have done this year so far to reduce any economic burden on our citizens for them to be able to better adapt and deal with the pandemic. And I would say that the rate structure that was part of your budget action back in June, we were able to make that primarily because you had invested in our new our water metering system that's automated, and that has freed up a lot of funds that we otherwise had to pay a lot of folks to monitor. But it was in everybody's mind when you passed the budget, looking to try to free up what you can to help the community. And so that was $4 million of rate reductions that you approved just a couple of months ago. And then you decided not to raise water and sewer rates because of the pandemic, which avoided another $1.6 million of costs for the community. You further reduced the property tax rate for the first time, I think, in 5 or 6 years by $250,000, and also a reduction in alcohol license fees. We mentioned the resiliency package allocation that you approved back on July the 7th. And then tonight, you have approved another $5.3 million with the CARES Act Commission Defined Option. We mentioned the CARES CDBG CV, and we've just received some information with HUD, which I'll be sharing with you later. That's another $830,000 that's forthcoming. So really, within the last 2 months, the actions that you've taken in support of the community during the pandemic to lessen economic burden totals over $18 million, which is a significant amount of money compared to what we normally do in any given year. So with that, I would like to continue to come before you each month just so that we can keep you and the public updated on what's going on and the actions that have been taken. That captured several months, so a lot of material there, and it went for a while, but I'll entertain any questions, Mayor, that there are.
Thanks for the presentation, Blaine. I think it's credit to everybody in this organization, staff members who've been working overtime since March, commissioners who've been begging, borrowing, and stealing opportunities that they've seen in this community, and adopting things that they know are happening in other places. So we've got a couple more items, but if anybody has questions about some of the material Blaine presented, or kind of where we go from here, and again, noting that this is going to be a recurrent component of our work sessions for the foreseeable future. So I've got Allison and Melissa
And Mike.
and Mike and
Thank you.
Ovita.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Blaine. I think I just sent a message to Kelly. He'll make sure that this will be up to where the public can see this. I guess the summary is so much to take in. I was hoping that we could maybe in an email follow-up get a chart of the overlaps of the topics that we've already paid for that were presented tonight that are relevant in the CARES Act funding. I think that it's not clear based on what we just looked at and talked about earlier today, how much of what was just presented tonight is getting reimbursed and for future reimbursement.
Well, I would tell you that those figures that I put there at the end, none of those are being reimbursed.
Understood. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, just, the abundance of things, because it seems to me that if our resilience package and what used to be the prosperity package of the topics that we have prioritized for them also are relevant under the CARES Act, that there's going to be future overlap, just like, when the SPLOS committee was looking at things and they said, well, this is T-SPLOS. So if you can continue to chart those items so that we understand the overlap, that'd be great.
Yes, that's an excellent point, Commissioner Wright. And for instance, the $150,000, the $300,000 of the indigent services, we're going to be asking the state if those could be considered, because the money's spent, if there is a phase 2 of funding, if those would be eligible expenses, and then, you could keep the money going, so to speak, much like you're doing with the Commission Defined Option tonight.
That's right. And I know you guys are keeping track of a lot of things and charting them through finance and stuff like that. But it's a revolving door. We've been moving a lot of money around for a lot of important things. So any of that we can be reimbursed for is great. And thanks for the presentation. And I look forward to that being online so everybody else can see it and us get a copy of it. Thanks.
Thanks, Allison. I'll turn to Evita next.
Okay. I think this message. I'm going to go out and come back because it sounds like echo. Are you hearing the echo?
Yeah, Evita, it's choppy.
Let me go out and come back in.
All right, I'll move over to Mike, and while Evita works on our sound.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. And I guess I would say I appreciate the presentation. I didn't see it on our agenda tonight or online. Maybe it was. Maybe I just missed it, but I would have liked to have seen that beforehand. The thing I would caution us against, though, is patting ourselves on the back a little too much. I mean, certainly, we're doing what government ought to be doing in times of situations like this. And I would say what we should be asking ourselves is how we can do better. And instead of saying, look at what we've done. I mean, we've talked about 1.5 million minutes of people watching. Well, 15 of that was just taken up by this presentation, 15 minutes of it. We talk about the 1,200 subscribers that we have to the newsletter. Well, Commissioner Herod has 1,200 for his district alone, which is an enjoyable read every month if you get it, and you can detect the sarcasm in my voice when I say that. But I guess I would argue that as a commission, we need to keep making sure to push the envelope, to push our and to making sure that we are moving quicker. And we are moving more efficiently. I see, you just read about what other communities are doing, and y'all, I hate to say this, they're so much farther ahead of us. How do look at? I mean, Manager Williams sent out an email yesterday about how Rome is using some of their CDBG CARES money for some grant dollars. We haven't even begun to talk about the CDBG grant money that we have available to us, say $150,000. We haven't even been able to discuss what our next sort of economic development is going to look like in this community based on how this has changed, how people work in office settings and learning settings and such as that. Those are conversations we should be having now. We've been talking about the Athens community work back. We voted on that in June. And that should have been ready to roll out July 1st, not September 1st, which is where we're getting to. And I hate to be such a downer about all this, but I mean, let's not sit there and pat. A lot of good has been done. Yes, I agree, but there's so much more that could be done. And I'll have to say, Manager Williams, it's a bit condescending when I hear you say citizens don't understand what we've done. Citizens do understand what we've done, and citizens do understand what we haven't done. And I think we ought to give the people we represent a bit more credit in recognizing what's been done and what needs to be done and where they want to go and where we need to go. So I guess I don't know. I'm probably just still grumpy, but I just want us to make sure that we're moving quicker, we're moving faster, because people expect that these days. In this video world we're living in this instant information world we're living in, people expect instant results, and we should be able to provide that and make that happen. So that's all I have to say. Thanks, Mayor. I'm sorry if I rambled on too long.
Thanks, Mike. I mean, I'll say that, I've found, in interacting with a lot more cities than I otherwise would have pre-COVID, it's really a mutual support environment. We're all learning from each other. So I'm glad that we get to see what Rome is doing or what Savannah is doing. But I'll also share that a lot of communities have asked me about some of the specific things that we've rolled out. The community core is something I presented to the Georgia Municipal Association about a month ago, and several mayors and city managers asked for that presentation. It's a tough time for everyone. There's no doubt. But I mean, I think all of you have a lot to be proud of for the work you're doing on the ground every day and the resources you're drawing together. So I'm glad to be part of that web with all of you. Melissa?
Kelly, my point was community core should have already been started by now.
Melissa?
Yeah. Well, my primary concern in all this is going to the source of the problem, and that is halting the infection rate in our community. The infection rate has increased 10 times since the shelter in place was prematurely lifted. And I want to know obviously there is absolutely no leadership at the state and the federal level to halt this infection. And we're trying, we issued our mask mandate and we are, tried to close the bars early, and that's being challenged. But I wonder what other tools that we could use to get the message out. We did a great job early on, back in March. Our public information office did do a great job. There were yard signs everywhere, flyers distributed. People got the message, and, community leaders stepped up to get that message out for folks to shelter in place. I still have my yard sign up telling people to stay inside and stay back. I feel like we need to renew that messaging because this pandemic has only gotten worse. We are in a much, much, much worse place than we were back in April. And we're about to see 30,000 college students who are, the statistics show that this is the highest infection rate demographic. We're not getting the localized data we need. I'm wondering if maybe the mayor and the manager can appeal to GMA for some of that localized demographic data, because we're only getting Northeast Georgia Health District-wide data. We really need to double down on attacking this issue at the source, because the problems that this community faces as far as economic development and the need for indigent services are only going to get worse as long as this pandemic rages. I know we're allocating money to our independent agency healthcare providers, but we need to get messages out there. And I'm wondering if we can renew a hardcore marketing campaign that blankets downtown and targets the student population that's coming into town on appropriate behaviors during a pandemic. I've not gotten any response from UGA as to what they're doing to educate students regarding appropriate behavior off campus. I know that they're, mandating masks on campus, and they're going to, great efforts to see that students socially distance in buildings and stuff. I'm not sure what the heck's going to be going on in the dorms, but we need to somehow get the message out of people need to continue to socially distance in downtown. They need to keep their masks on as whenever possible. They need to understand that if they're walking into a bar, this is a whole different world, and they cannot behave the way that they typically would. So I think it's upon us to get that message out there. I did speak with Department of Public Health officials last week, and they are working on some messaging. So I would ask that public information reach out to the Department of Public Health and work together on how we can get that message out there, and let folks know that just because the governor has washed his hands of this problem, that this problem is still around.
Thanks, Melissa. I certainly agree that we haven't gotten the depth of support from our state and federal partners, as it were, that we've needed. On the specific question of local data, I've asked that new weekly report that the Northeast Health District is going to be creating have local data for items such as positivity rates, rather than just having district-wide data. So we've got that material for just Athens-Clarke. So I want to pass that along. Ovita, you're back on.
I think I'm okay now. Can you hear me?
Sounds good.
Okay. That was a little overwhelming for me, having all the information at one time, but I do know we've been real busy with a lot of other things. So I hope we get an opportunity maybe at the retreat to dissect some of that a little, break it down a little bit more. The question I specifically have is about the loan program, the authority that we just set up. And I think your PowerPoint laying said the deadline for RFQs is going to be August the 14th. And it looks like they were made public on August the 7th. So there was 7 days for people to apply for a loan.
That's not for individuals, but Blaine, if you want to explain that.
Well, sure. I know, Mayor, you serve on JDA as well. Avita, that's to find a third-party entity to help, process the loan applications, cut the checks. So they
not the person that is going to be applying for the loan.
That's right. Yes, basically the bank.
Okay. And there was another question I had. What did we do with, how did we partner with the mobile health clinic? What exactly did we do with Dr. Lester?
Well, early on, as you know, Dr. Lester, when they first started up, they really got a lot of great support from the health district. And we asked, is there anything we can do for you? And they said, well, if you can help support us paying for, the line that they were using for their hotline, we were glad to do it and did that very quickly. And then with PPE and flyers and things of that nature, we've continued to support them. And I think that it was because this summer they may have lost some folks that were helping with the hotline. They needed some staffing assistance, and so we're helping with that as well.
And my last question is, and it goes a little bit to Commissioner Links and how we get the word out. I hope that we have a plan to diversify our communication and who we are using to get the word out on these important issues. I do know that most people do not, the people that I know and associate with, they usually do not go to the ACC website. So I think we should get creative on how we get the word out in the community, and making sure that we support advertisement equitably. I don't think we've done that as well as we could do. Those are my comments.
Thanks, Avita. Anyone else for tonight before we move on? All right, we're going to go ahead take a look at our first of 3 items for future consideration, which is preliminary plans for the rail to trail component between Hancock Industrial Road and Winterville proper, along what we know as the Firefly Trail. So really exciting to have the first phase, actually really first 2 phases of this view include Winterville proper on the ground. If you haven't been out to the Winterville segment, I encourage everybody to go out there. It's really nice. And so I think Derek Doster is going to begin.
Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate y'all having me in tonight, and look forward to getting our next and last phase of the Firefly Trail up to speed and get it moving. I'd take an opportunity to share a work session presentation for you, and we will get it started. Again, this is what we refer to as a sub-project 3, and tonight we'll review the preliminary plans or select sections of it. We'll review a little bit of history, look at the project area, our budget, review our next steps, and be happy to try to answer any questions that may be asked tonight. This was the initial project statement. It was a continuation, of course, of the 2011 and actually the 2005 programs from way back. And this is the application map that was done with the project. We've eventually broken into several sub-projects, of course. Sub-project 2 from Old Winterville Road out to Hancock Road is under construction now. When you approve the project concept, you approved to separate the Winterville proper into to its own project. So we developed that as 3.1. And so tonight specifically, we're talking about subproject number 3, which would take off from Hancock Road into basically the old 5 points there at Winterville at Morse Grove, Athens Road, Smithsonian, Cherokee. A little history for some of those that not been around as long as the other ones. Just wanted to, this little gem that back in 06 that we partnered with the Athens Land Trust to purchase 63 acres from the Eugene and Langdale estate. And that partnership included an exclusion of the old historic rail bed to make sure that we could have the opportunity to move the trail in at that time. So that was some good thinking and some planning ahead from a while back. Again, you've approved the project concept. The citizens approved the T-Splats program. And then you approved the budget amendments to move forward with the program. And then in 19, we've committed to move the subproject 3.1 early on, and that's wrapping up as we speak today. So we hope to have that finished by the end of this month and first of next month. And so the Winterville section will be completed. We approved a construction contract for subproject 2 back in May, and they've started their work. And then last fall, these are out of order, my apologies. But we did host a public information open house for the subproject 3. And we sent approximately 150 postcards out, mailed to property owners along the adjacent trail and in the close proximity, and had that meeting. And we had several people attend just to let them know that this section was fixing to start, and we would start survey and some plan of data gathering to get to this point tonight. About a little over a month ago, the manager's office took the opportunity and we expanded our user group to include 2 additional citizen members. We had our same citizen members on there to provide some continuity from our Redwood Trail Committee and Firefly Trail with Dorothy O'Neill and Mike Hall. And then the manager office graciously put Shawanda Johnson, who's an area resident and part of the Family Connections. She's a neighborhood leader. And then Bruce Johnston, an area resident, and then also a member of the Firefly Trail Inc. And so we had a discussion and went over these preliminary plans on the 29th with our user group. Again, just a little blow up of the previous map that you saw. So subproject 2 wrapping up in September of 2021, we anticipate, and begin there at Hancock Road. And we would follow the historic rail bed according to get to the end of the intersection of Athens Road, Cherokee, Morris Grove, and Smithsonian Road right there, where 3.1 begins, which we're wrapping up construction as we speak. Didn't include the whole set of preliminary plans because they're over 80 pages due to the length of this volume. And so we've taken some selective sections out to share with you. Again, these are the typical sections. We have a 12-foot wide concrete trail, barrier wall, not walls, but barrier fencing and guardrails where we need to, where the slope's appropriate. So those won't be, there'll only be the fencing along the edge of the trail where it's absolutely necessary due to safety purposes. We will begin the trail at, as we mentioned before, right here at the Spring Valley Road, Hancock Road intersection. Pick up there, travel down Hancock Road till we get to where the existing rail bed intersects with Hancock Road, and we would transition back on to the old rail bed at that point in time. And you can see from the profile, it's very flat through that area. We took the opportunity to try to develop a couple of renderings as we move through, just to give you an idea. This is where we would start. You can see the existing conditions, a rendering of proposed improvements, the cross sections there, the plan view, and an aerial view with a pin map where that location is. This is downstream from where we just were. This is a typical plan and profile section. When it goes through the country like this, or through the woods, if you would, not a lot of detail, but you can see the contours where this was a cut section of the rail bed. So the actual slopes were the right of way of the railway, probably sticking up about 12 to 15 feet above grade. So right here is in a little cut section. But again, you can see the profile. We're following the profile along. Again, this is another example of a rendering of that location in that area. Again, you can see the cut section there. It's all grown up with vegetation. What a proposed improvement may look like. The plan sheet, the profile sheet, and then the aerial view with the pin drop. You can just kind of see how it moves away from Hancock and starting behind those houses there in that area. This sheet we wanted to bring to your attention. This is just right a little west of Rannoch Road. This is where this particular home, this property owner had built her house. So we didn't, of course, wanted to shift away from the home as much as possible. And so we shifted it towards the road, coming off the rail bed through that area and getting closer to the road to try to provide as much distance between the home and the trail as much as possible. This is the corner of Rannoch Road. We'd like to share with you, several years ago, some of you may remember that Unified Government had an opportunity to pick up 3 corner lots along Spring Valley and Rannoch Road from an estate sale. Former county attorney helped pull that together with the executor of that estate. And so we were able to get that, and it would be a wonderful place for construction staging and eventually for trailhead and parking area. We do not have any planned development at this time due to budget concerns, but that land would be there and we could fulfill that obligation at a later date. Moving on down, this is where we get to Thomas Farms subdivision. This is the first entrance, Gretchen Lane. And if Thomas Farms, I failed to mention in the history, Thomas Farms is a conservation subdivision. When they developed that subdivision, they promoted they knew the trail proximity and protected the area for the old rail bed for the future trail and one to be developed in the future. So that conservation easement was written in mind to allow that development. This is the second entrance to the Thomas Farm subdivision. We shifted a little bit away from Spring Valley Road there due to some safety considerations. They have a very nice entrance piece up, some brick columns and signage up along the top. So when we started looking at that, it made a little more sense. And from a safety standpoint, pulled this section away from the intersection that we felt was most appropriate here. And then we transitioned right back onto the old rail bed and then transitioned through and traversed through Thomas Farm subdivision through that conservation easement. Again, another rendering, just again to the east of Thomas Farm subdivision. The existing conditions, it's a cut section. You can see the proposed improvements that would be shown in the aerial about where it is right there with the profile and cross section. We moved on a little bit further to the east. This is piece of property. The Anderson property is now, it's that former Langdale property. So this is the area that we talked about that we coordinated the conservation easement and purchased the 63 acres that I mentioned earlier. So again, half of this trail has been thought about for a long time with that coordination and that pre-planning. And the property to the north is the Edwards property, but this is again just a plan and profile sheet of a general trail construction. This is another rendering. It's just again continuing to the east, this section, it just shows a transition from a cut section from the previous one to where the trail or the railroad had built a fill section. So you can see the cross sections. It's just up on top of the hill instead of a cut down. And so this is what it would look like. This is some existing pasture fence, the existing conditions as you see, and the proposed improvements. Of course, we would have to negotiate that easement and adjust the pasture fence to build a construction trail. Again, another just plan and profile sheet. This is approaching the back of the Oakmont subdivision area along the historic rail bed. And this is an area that we'd like to talk about the potential construction access because of the long nature of the trail construction. Sometimes it's easier to go ahead and coordinate that construction access to get in and out and make construction move a little easier and a little quicker. So we'll try to continue to look at that as we develop the plans. This is where we're getting into a little bit. This is again behind the Oakmont subdivision. We're starting to get to what we would consider areas of concern. And so we're shifting off the original railbed alignment to move forward to try to avoid some outbuildings and conflicts. This particular property owner has a couple outbuildings that we would have to negotiate and talk to them about either potentially purchasing or rebuilding them as part of the construction project. And then you can see we've shifted the trail a little bit outside the original alignment, being in the middle of the railroad right of way, trying to just provide as much space on those property owners as possible. When we continue in, again, the neighbor there, shifting the trail outside the rail bed a little bit to get it closer to the original rail line and the property line to avoid some swimming pool and some outbuildings. Again, we would have to negotiate that with that particular property owner and see if there may be some privacy fencing or some other type of material that we could provide to make that more palatable. And then we shift back to the rail bed, and then we move in. Then we move all the way down to our end at Morris Grove and Athens Road intersection. And then right there on the corner is a piece of property that's, I think it's the Own the Vine business right now that they rent that space from that property owner. And we tie into the crosswalk, move to the east, and we tie into our 3.1 section that we're wrapping up construction. Project information. Just to let everyone know, it's about 3.4 miles. We're planning a 12-foot concrete wide trail. There's approximately 75 property easement agreements that we would have to negotiate due to that length and due to the property lines there. Again, Granite Road, Trailhead, we own those parcels. The Thomas Farm subdivision and the Langdale property have the conservation green space that preserve this opportunity. And we do want to note there's about 6 of the properties that we showed you, and there are 2 or 3 outbuildings that may require relocation or some sort of acknowledgement of how to address those. From a budgetary standpoint, the T-SPLOST funding, with our existing commitments that we have there, we think there's about $2.3 million that we may have available, not including the contingency if we don't use it during our existing construction projects and our Trail Creek Bridge replacement. But our current estimates right now are a little bit over $3.7 million. So we anticipate a budget shortfall on the project at this time, which hopefully could be made up so we can make this project whole. Or we'd have to, if you so directed by y'all, that we would need to regroup on how much we may pave or not pave and just get the subgrade and potentially a non-hard surface trail in there. However, that extends operation and maintenance costs, but we can have that conversation as we move forward on completion of the other sub-projects. Wanted to share this with you. We're not following our normal mayor and commission cycle. We've delayed this just due because of the length, the number of property owners that are there. So we want to, starting tomorrow, we're going to have it listed on Leisure Services webpage. We're planning a WebEx session on the 20th. If anybody wants to join that, we'll try to make sure that those recordings are up on the Leisure Services webpage through the end of the public comment period. We plan to have some in-person, we said in-person by appointment or safe distancing opportunities, because we know not everybody gets a chance to get online, and sometimes it's a little hard to look at these documents online. We don't have we're working with the City of Winterville trying to identify a space out there that may be conducive for having a meeting. But we've yet to determine those locations, but as soon as we do, we'll get those posted. I'm planning to join the Athens in Motion committee member on committee meeting on August 25th to review these documents. We would like to conclude public input on September 9th. And then, of course, when we come to you during the September-October cycle for approval or guidance. And then again, our next steps, move through our public information opportunities, mayor commission meetings, and then you can see what it would take to get the final design, easement acquisitions, project permitting. And then if things fell into line, then we would hopefully be under construction next fall and wrapping up by 2023. So thank you. And I think that's what we had tonight. I know that's a lot of slides, but we're happy to try to answer any questions as best we can.
Thanks, Derek. I really appreciate staff being particularly attentive to some of those conflict areas and developing those deviations. Questions from commissioners? Allison?
Yeah, thanks. I also appreciate the sticking with the historic rail bed as a primary objective, so to speak, but yet understanding where it's best for everybody to route around a little bit. On the public input outreach, just because of our situation with limited open forums, when you talk about having something on the Leisure Services website, I'm hoping that we could get something about this topic on the front of ACC Gov website, because Leisure Services website is it's tucked kind of deep within the website, and so that maybe we could have something on the front homepage of ACC Gov that helps lead people into where it is, so that it's not so hard to find and easy to get public comment. But other than that, I think it sounds like everything's lined up really well, and I look forward to hearing what the commissioners whose district this is in think about it as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Allison. Others, Patrick?
Of course. So thank you. Thank you, Mr. Dawson. It's been a great presentation. And I was just wondering, some of the citizens have provided input around the Gordon Circle, Kearney Lake Road, and the Morris Grove Road, on like slightly deviating from the plan, because around that area, if the viewing audience want to take a look at the Google map, if I am correct and listening to the constituents, if that trail is built, it's going to go through several, it's going to go through several structures, and it might possibly split properties and one homeowner's property. What is your train of thought, or what is the consensus, or what's the thought of like deviating from the original trail and going up Morris Grove Road partially?
Well, I think that that is a possibility. It really depends on the language in the SPLOST and what we're paying for with the SPLOST. I think the original 2011 program may have mentioned generally on the rail line, and I'm not sure. And I know that Judd has been reviewing this. I know the former attorney Bill Berryman had some thoughts on that, and Judd's getting up to speed on all that. But if the language has the flexibility, that is a possibility, Commissioner Davenport, that we could deviate from the historic line.
Okay. Well, so just a follow up, because as an Athenian, a native Athenian, if you look at Athens Road from North Main Street from Winterville, North Main Street actually went straight into kind of a little 5 points area into the Morris Grove, Cherokee Road, Athens Road area. And the trail, not the train track, if I am correct, it actually followed North Main Street. But over the course of the years, we moved, the city of Winterville moved North Main Street to Athens Road. And so my argument is that technically, we're already deviating from the trail just in that little spot there. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yes, sir. I mean, I understand. I follow you in regards to the old rail bed right there. What I would consider old 5 points of Winterville. Yes, sir. And you're correct. When the roads have moved over time and tried to make a safe crossing, I mean, the reason that the intersection was relocated to begin with, of course, was to provide that safety. So. And we understand that. Again, we probably just need to work with the manager's office and the attorney's office to identify what deviation may or may not be acceptable.
All right.
Others? All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Derek, I really appreciate it. We are moving from a concrete trail to a water trail. We're going to talk about advancing some work that we've had under conversation for a long time. In this case, on the Middle Oconee River, where we've got one put-in area already at Ben Burton Park, and we have the opportunity not only for additional put-ins, but some dollars from outside the county to come in and supplement our support. So I'm going to turn it over to Mel Cochran.
Great. Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the Water Trails Project and a grant opportunity that we have for possibly building an access point on Macon Highway. And there we go. Well, there we go. So tonight I'm going to take you through the project history, go over the project summary, talk about the grant opportunity, and share the draft concepts with you. We'll look at the budget for the project and then discuss next steps and have a question and answer session. Just to walk you back through the history of this, in 2014, Mayor and Commission approved a resolution for water trails. And then in 2015, we received grant funding from the Riverview Foundation, as well as some additional funding that you all helped us get to construct a Ben Burton Park River access point for the water trail. In 2016, we completed construction. Currently, there's no public takeout available, and paddlers will make arrangements with private property owners to be able to take out if they do put in at Ben Burton. Again, this is the start of our trail on the Middle Oconee River. In 2017, Mayor and Commission adopted the updated Greenway Network Plan, and that included water trails on the North and Middle Oconee Rivers. And then in 2018 and 2019, we explored opportunities for some takeout sites on the Middle Oconee and completed some due diligence work for the Macon Highway site. It came out as really the top candidate and the most doable, down to the point where we went ahead and had an appraisal for that property. In November of 2019, the SPLOST 2020 referendum was approved, and that included project number 34 for water trails. So what is this project? The Macon Highway Water Trail Access Point is a public takeout spot that does provide a complement to the Ben Burton launch. This is a place that will be available for the public to be able to take out. They can put in at Ben Burton, paddle down to this Macon Highway spot, take out of the river, and then if the river or the water trail developed further on, this could also be a put-in spot in the future. So this project has been in conceptual development for a while, but we've just been waiting for an opportunity to fund it. As I stated earlier, it is part of the SPLOST 2020 Water Trails project, and it is the highest priority for staff as well as the Water Trails Committee due to that completion of the Middle Oconee Water Trail in Athens-Clarke County. So this would give us a complete segment of water trail on the Middle Oconee River, which is a pretty exciting prospect. The grant opportunity we have is the Land and Water Conservation Fund. That's the LWCF grant. This is something, we've had a lot of different projects in the past that we've had help implementing because of this grant funding, but this is one that's a really good fit for this grant opportunity. It's a great opportunity to leverage, 50% of the funds to help construct this. It is a matching grant. It is a reimbursement grant. But this would provide an opportunity for us to build this access at 50% of the cost, essentially, is what we're talking about with this grant opportunity. So what are we looking at? This is the river access concept plan. You can see we just have a small parking space or small parking area that is off of Macon Highway. And this wouldn't be a straight out land acquisition, actually kind of a recreational easement acquisition from the current property owners. We're looking at 9 spaces, having a nice kind of landscaped area, the split rail fence, and then an access path down to the access point for the river. So this is a small, publicly accessible access point to the river that we're looking at constructing here. You can see this is the more engineered style concept plan. You can see the parking that is up toward the top of the drawing, the upper right. You can see where the pathway comes down, paralleling Macon Highway, coming down to the river. And then we have a combination of steps with kind of a canoe ramp that would allow people to then be able to get out of the river or into the river. So this is a basic design. We've worked with DNR and some of their launch site designers looking at how this would work to make sure that we are getting something that would be workable with this design. You can also see here's South Lumpkin, here is Macon Highway, and you can just get an idea of where we would need to create kind of a turn lane that goes into the parking lot. So there's a little bit more that goes into this project than just the typical parking lot design. There's this turning lane that we would need to create for safety and things like that. Just to give you some examples, you can see here in the upper left is the Middle Oconee River access point in Ben Burton Park. This was a design that we've tried that's just a straight concrete ramp going into the river. Over to the right, you see the Chattooga River example, and that shows you what a canoe slide can look like, or a boat slide. And that makes it a lot easier. If any of you have ever carried a boat in and out of the water, it certainly does make your life quite a bit easier as you're trying to lug it out of there. I know I've got about an 80-pound canoe, and something like this would be amazing whenever I go paddling. You can see the East Ridge ramp. You can see people coming down that ramp. It's a little narrower, not quite as wide as the Middle Oconee access. And then the Toccoa River launch, which, fun fact, was one of my first projects I worked on when I worked for the Forest Service. But this was a pretty neat one that actually provided an accessible ramp all the way down to the Toccoa River. So, in looking at all these different styles, we're looking at the steps combined with the ramp as the access for this particular design. The project budget, currently in Project 34 for SPLOST 2020, there's $750,000 available. The whole project would run us about $480,000, but if we were able to get the LWCF grant, we could actually reduce that cost by 50% because of that 50% grant, and that would give us $240,000. So at the end of the day, if we were able to construct this project and be able to actually leverage these grant funds for this project, we would end up with, rather than $270,000 left for other projects on top of this, we would have $510,000 left for future water trails program development. So that's why this grant proposal is super exciting for us as an opportunity to match our local dollars and leverage those to be able to stretch our SPLOST project dollars further. So what are our next steps? There's the potential to have some public input in August and September. If this is something we want to pursue, we need to move an agenda item forward in the September-October cycle, and that's for pre-application approval. Pre-applications are due October 31st, and we do need to have a local approval that would say that, yes, we're on board with applying for this grant and we've identified the funding. And then the final grant proposal approval we could put before you based on the notification and the schedule. So the pre-approval or pre-application period closes October 31st. They're looking at reviewing those applications in November and December. And then they would announce who was eligible for the second level of application in February. Those would be due May 1st of next year. And then in mid to late fall of 2021, they would actually execute the grant agreements and people could start moving into the project. So does anyone have any questions for me?
All right. Allison Wright, jump on into the water.
Yes, the water trails. It's been a long time, Mel. I just love it. I'm so excited to see this agenda item. I'm going back to in time in 2013, first year on commission. And when I talked about being on the Water Trails Committee, Jerry Neesmith couldn't have me just there by myself, had to join in. And he and I learned quickly we were both water rats. And I think we helped get that resolution in 2013 or 14, whenever that came forward. But anyway, tomorrow is Jerry's birthday. And I know that this is like a birthday present in his honor that we are finally getting the second part of this trail underway. And I hope that the fact that this is a second point on the same river, Mel, do you think that's going to help this grant? Because it would complete what is officially a water trail because you have 2 points on the same riverway. So that was my question is that helpful in this grant process?
That is absolutely helpful. And this proposal was actually something that the DNR said was a better fit because in the past we've had people ask, or we've had kind of, why don't you apply for the RTP, the Recreational Trails Program grant? But it actually isn't as good of a fit as this LWCF grant is. And when you go through and look at the requirements and look at what this project has to offer, it's just checking boxes. So it just seems like a really great fit. And the fact that it is completing the water trail in the middle of Coney is a huge bonus.
Well, that's great. And I know I've seen a sketch of this idea from years ago, and I'm glad that your work has been successful with that church. And if everybody would cruise by this before it becomes on our agenda, it is a kudzu field at this point. And there's maybe just a small path to get to the billboard. And it just seems like a perfect complement to the SPLOS that the citizens want. So I suspect that the public input is also going to be positive. And getting that first river access at Ben Burton, which Commissioner Neesmith has always wanted an amenity. And it's quite the amenity for us to have that first one. And it's great to get the second part. So I am all for it and will help promote it in my newsletter, but I suspect that you're only going to get positive stuff, and whatever negative you might get, I feel certain that you guys can address it because this looks very thorough. Thanks for your hard work on that, Mel. I know it's been a long time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Allison. Other questions?
Yeah, I just wanted to add to Allison's comments. I'm excited about this. It's been a long time coming, and it'll be really, really nice to be able to have a public access point to put in and a public access point to pull out. And I'm excited about this grant because it preserves some funding so we can get more of these access points. And I'm looking forward to hearing, what some other possible sites might be. Because I presume they're in the works.
Mel, are you looking at beyond this? Are you looking at additional Middle Oconee places, or would we jump over to the North Oconee next?
I think if we finish this one, I would consider the Middle Oconee Water Trail for as much as we can get of a good workable trail would be complete, and then we would move on to the North Oconee. Because I think what we would look at for the Middle Oconee to make a nice trip from this point on, we would be moving into Oconee County, so we would start to look at them and see what, they can figure out if they want to continue the water trail or not. But I think if we get this, then we'll start focusing on the north. And we have been exploring all sorts of different opportunities on the north. So we have a lot of ideas there and a lot of we've been exploring different sites. And again, looking at those with some of the same DNR folks that design these launches to see what some good sites and portage areas for the areas like the Easley Mill Dam would be. So we're definitely looking at all of that.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks, Melissa. Any other questions about this one?
Thank you, Mayor. Can I say something?
Yeah, please.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure this is my district. It's really close to my house, and I'm really excited to see it because the Middle Oconee is a really beautiful watershed, especially to view wildlife. And there's a nice little rapid right before the takeout proposed here on the old Princeton Mill, which was may have been the oldest mill, one of the oldest mills in town. It dates back to 1850, and the old mill works are there. You can see the old stone wall that the rapid goes through. So this is going to be a great amenity for the community to complete this water trail. This is a really awesome project. So I'm really excited. Thank you.
Thanks, Russell. Anything else on this? All right, I'm looking forward to putting my kayak in the water and getting out at Macon Highway. Mel, Godspeed on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, everybody. Last item that we have before a very brief executive session on real estate is legislative items for discussion for the 2021 General Assembly session. The General Assembly, like all of us, has not known what has hit it this year. There's chatter about a special session here in the weeks ahead. Dates TBA, but anticipation would be that their standard session would commence in January 2021. We've got about half a dozen items here. And I think I'll say a lesson learned is that less is more in terms of deliverables to our local delegation. If we really want some substantive action, if we come in with, 6 or 8 items, that creates greater heft for each of those items than if we have a list of 30. So, you see, I think the easiest thing to do would be to sort of just quickly run through these items, see if there's consensus around all of them, or if we'd like to explore some more of them in more detail before we bring them to the local delegation. First item is one that is recurrent, the low-income homestead exemption that we initially brought to the General Assembly last year. Second, Medicaid expansion, still available under the Affordable Cares Act. Opportunity to, particularly in a state with a relatively low insured rate, ensure that many more of our constituents have access. Third, we've had a lot of conversation about, of course, amidst the pandemic, clarifying that gratuities clause so that local governments can very clearly offer direct assistance to constituents. Another recurrent one, being explicit around allowing local regulation of septic tanks. Next one, allowing greater flexibility around local forces to run radar on local streets. Moving on, creating continued opportunity for drop boxes for polling during the pandemic. And I would just say, a personal editorial note, I think it's just a good mechanism all around, even when we're beyond the pandemic. And then finally, amending of the state election code so that if a deceased candidate receives the most votes in an election, then a special election shall be held to fill that office. And so I wanted to see if there were consensus or any more information that folks want about any one of these before we bring these sort of en masse to the delegation. I'm going to start with Melissa, then move to Allison.
Yeah, I must have missed the email calling for these. I've been a little distracted lately. And I certainly agree with there's a lot of things on here that come up every year, over and over again. We ask for. Certainly, I'm all for everything on this list. I'd like to add the request that we that inclusionary zoning be allowed in local governments. That's something we've asked for in the past, but allowing us to develop a clear inclusionary zoning ordinance that would compel developers to include affordable housing or to put a set aside that goes towards affordable housing.
So there'd be a requirement rather than just a voluntary program.
Yes, exactly.
All right. Anything else that folks want to clarify about some of these? Allison?
Yeah, it occurs to me now that I wrote that down that that's the State Board of Elections. That's really not relevant for us with the delegation, right? That was the State Board of Elections. Wrong. I have the wrong group to promote that with, I think.
Yeah, I mean, certainly Secretary of State's office obviously regulates that activity.
I guess maybe I want to be able to thank them for different things, that they've done. Maybe I should just thank them for supporting that process versus. I think it's a report ask because it doesn't really go in front of them.
All right.
And so the thing that I would like clarification on, and I do support the low income homestead exemption, and I was also working towards changing the level of the homestead exemption that currently exists, and it seems that there maybe was a discrepancy in process, and so I was wondering if we could speak to them about the optimal process for bringing something forward. The item number 1 here from Commissioner Denson is low-income homestead exemption, and that's a new thing. So I understood that there was a resolution that was needed to show that we had 100% support. And then when the process of modifying our current homestead exemption to increase it, to put it in front of the voters, it seemed like there was maybe a different idea of the protocol. So I guess I'm hoping that we can get some clarification for us from them, because when something that we are asking for our delegation to do is one thing, and that's the end of the story. But if we're asking our delegation to do something so we can ask our citizens to vote on it, it seems like, I don't know. I guess I want some clarification because I want to make sure our process coming to them is accurate to get things done, right? Because we had a little difference of approach, and it looks like we got neither.
Well, so any change in homestead exemption would ultimately have to go before the voters, before the electorate on a ballot, as would the moderate income homestead exemption that we talked about initially last winter and spring, and then obviously later had additional conversation about expanding the overall homestead exemption from the current $10,000 to some other amount, and that would have to go in front of the voters too. So,
right. But my point was, I wasn't trying to take away from one from the other, but in my mind, the current homestead exemption being changed was something already on the books that I didn't realize we needed a resolution from our group from. And I don't think Houston Gaines did either, but it sounds like Spencer did feel like it had to have that, where this low-income homestead exemption is a totally new topic, both obviously going to go in front of our constituents or our community to vote on. And I just want to be clear on what we need to be doing so that the conflict, so we don't have the conflict, so that things are moving forward positively.
Yeah, and we've always sought unanimity from this group before going ahead to the General Assembly delegation. It simply presents a strong case, and they look for that from us as well. So in some ways, that's sort of a mutual approach that, all 11 members of this body, want to see this, and then they accept that as something that they're going to spend the energy to work on in the context of the session.
Okay. And so the fact that it's going in front of the public to vote on doesn't matter. and it doesn't matter if it's an existing thing that's being modified. So it sounds like I don't need to ask for clarification from you because, Kelly, it sounds like you have the clarification.
Yep. Yeah, that's right. So all of us want to see these if they're going to move forward.
Okay. So then
get a bill dropped.
Okay. So while we're talking about that, so then when I was moving forward or have been talking since February with budgets about this happening for the topic of the homestead exemption going from 10,000 up some, then my role would have been to get a resolution or just a vote before this whole body.
Or just consensus from every member of the body.
Okay. And I understand, too, the pandemic dropped in, too, and I think that when we passed the low-income homestead exemption, that was before the pandemic, too, so that could have, the timing of all this was a lot going on. Okay, well, so that clarifies what I was going to ask about since you've got it, and that's good that you do. Thanks, Kelly.
Yeah, definitely. Ovita?
Oh, Ovita, I was waving at the baby. No, I'm good. My question is, and was, that was the first time I participated in that type of process. Is it always the commission asking our delegation or telling our delegation what we want, or do they ever ask us what, or is it vice, do they have the opportunity for us? Because there's been two things that came up, one that Allison had mentioned and another situation that that came to us kind of haphazardly. So is there a transfer of ask, or is it just us asking them?
It's primarily us seeking to have bills drop during the session. Occasionally, the delegation has noted that there may be some ongoing or nascent activity on the state level that we as a local government partner can help with. So sometimes there's a little bit of that, but primarily it's us asking them to create some legislation to drop.
So if there is something that one of our delegates want locally, something just locally, do they just go to that particular commissioner and then that commissioner routes it to us, since it's such a rarity? I mean, it doesn't sound like there's a process, but we did have a situation that that's in my mind that I'm just wondering how that would have went.
They could bring it to any one of us or certainly to me. And sometimes in the context of those two body meetings where you've got the entire 5-member delegation to the General Assembly and then all 11 of us assembled, a delegation member will say, something I've observed is X, Y, or Z. So that happens once in a while.
Okay. Yep. Thank you.
Yep, you got it. All right, others?
I have one more thing that I just remembered.
Go ahead quick, and then I'll get Andy.
Oh, okay. The ADDA, I know in the past we've talked about asking them to expand the ADDA body since the downtown area itself has expanded so greatly, and the mission of the ADDA is certainly expanded. So I'm wondering, and that is state-enabled, the state-enabled body. So if we could add a couple members to that body, I think it might become more efficient and be able to spread the workload a little better. Okay.
And with these things that have come up tonight, I want to give everybody plenty of time to marinate on them and consider them. And I'll circle back to everybody before there's an agenda item assembled. Andy?
Thanks. So just briefly, I would agree with what the mayor said at the beginning. I think on this kind of thing, less is more. And so I'm glad that we don't have a list here of 30 things. I'm sure that we would, if we wanted to, we could generate a list of 30 things that we would probably all agree on, and 29 of them would be dead before they got out of the gate. So I totally agree that less is more. I do have a question, though, about the issue of clarifying the gratuities clause, because usually when we're talking with our delegation, what we're asking them to do is to introduce local legislation that we would that would help us do things here in Athens-Clarke County. And so my question is, and I think that I would love to see the gratuities clause clarified, but my question is that asking for them to drop a bill and to introduce legislation? Because another way that we can have that gratuities clause clarified is simply ask for an opinion from the Attorney General. So I would like some clarification as to what exactly is being asked. Is there an ask for introducing legislation to change that, because that would require a constitutional amendment, or are we simply asking for a clarification, in which case we could get that presumably from the Attorney General's office?
It's a good question, Andy.
Mr. Mayor?
I was going to ask for your perspective on that.
Yes, sir. So what we're actually going to do is asking for them. There's a general official code of Georgia code section that basically says that currently governments that are have a population of a certain size and greater provides them with flexibility to basically be able to assist nonprofits. I'm not saying the language exactly right, but what we're actually asking is for that code section to be amended to apply to local governments' populations in excess of 100,000, or however we think might be better. That's what we're asking for. It's not Commissioner Harrod's exactly right. We can't take a constitutional amendment. What we're asking is the flexibility that local governments in the large metropolitan areas comes from that code section, and we're asked to be included in that.
And,
so that's what we're actually doing.
Is that just for the purposes of COVID, or in other words,
for all purposes? For all purposes.
Well, I guess what I'm asking.
I'll be happy to send you a copy of that code section tomorrow on the rest of the commission to see how we.
I guess my question is what the ask would be to change it permanently, as opposed to simply temporarily allow governments to do things within the.
Oh yes, sir.
Okay, so forever.
Yes, sir. That's correct. And that statutory authority is in there for governments that have a population, I think, currently in excess of I don't want to misstate, but I think 250,000. So where we sit population wise, we don't get to take advantage of that. So we'd like to be included in that, and that's what we're talking about.
Okay, well that makes sense. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thanks, Judd. Thanks, Andy. Tim?
Thank you, Kelly. And actually, that was the first thing I was going to speak to when I put that on there, which is very open to having language that's more specific. And I think that Judd did just that. So I'm very happy that we could have that changed up and kind of more wording be designed more by the attorney's office to what exactly we're asking for, as he put there, rather than what I wrote in there.
Yeah, I can provide some clarifying language on that that'll accomplish what you want, Commissioner. You're picking that up from the memo we did earlier, and I think that's an excellent thing that you're doing. Yes, sir.
Right. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Judd.
Yes.
And then on the first one, on the low-income homes extension, just clarifying that the language that's in there and the document linked to is the exact same thing that we voted on the resolution back January of this year. So just to clarify on that. And then I definitely hear everybody's point, and I get it very clearly of trying to be very selective with our asks when we're bringing these things. Obviously, I think that Medicaid expansion is something that we all need and realize that we need here. I also probably realize that it is probably the largest grasping item on here. I would still like to see it included, if nothing else, just to have that discussion. And I think, obviously, in this year of the pandemic, it's even more timely. But if other people on the body saw this as just be us beating a dead horse, I'd be fine with us moving it. Just kind of what everybody else wants to do there.
Thanks, Tim.
All the points there.
Yeah, and I'll follow up with each of you about these items. If it's a dead horse, it's a glorious dead horse. Any other input or thoughts?
Mayor Gertz.
Yeah.
When are we? When's the scheduled meeting with the delegation?
I'm looking. I apologize. Give me just a half a second.
After the election, right? Because it looks like we're going to have some new delegation members.
So normally this would be September 8th. So it probably would be wise to wait till our December work session.
Sounds good to me.
Given the upcoming election, gives everybody time to get through it. Obviously, they've got this prospective special session coming up, so that gives us longer to kind of prepare our list too, and longer to, as I mentioned earlier, marinate on this. So let's make that change. And Gene, if you're listening, and I'll send an email to this effect. Let's go ahead and see if we can move that to December. Just given the short 2-year terms of General Assembly members, if they're in a year when there is going to be a completely static body, it is nice to have an earlier discussion with them to give them time to drop something. But particularly since we're really talking about a very small list this year, and some of these are items that we've spoken about in the past, I don't think having this conversation in December would be challenging.
And Kelly, it might, if you don't mind, December is a long way away right now with everything we're dealing with.
It is.
Yeah, the priorities may shift as so many things have in the last while. But so you're saying the next time that we would be talking with them would be in December?
That's right.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
All right. Yeah. Good call, Russell. We'll make that change. All right, everybody. Any further input on this? I would entertain a motion to re-enter executive session and adjourn upon conclusion of that session.
So moved.
I'll second.
I've got a motion from Commissioner Edwards, a second from Commissioner Link. All in favor?
Aye.
Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, Judd.
If you don't mind, if you could also, I know you mentioned real estate earlier, but there is one item that will take like 2 minutes I'd like to mention related to a litigation case we have, if you don't mind.
That's fine, Judd. We can hit that real quick.
Okay.
Rod, we're going to go ahead and leave the public feed and enter executive session.
Callie.
When we're cut.
Callie.
Yeah.
Do we have to vote to end the meeting right now?
We just did. It was in one.
No, I mean, it's at the end of our executive session.
We did that.
Okay.
Now, kind of anticipating the end of that executive session.
Okay.